Уважаемые
Dear former prisoners of concentration camps and all of the Holocaust survivors, President of the State of Israel, Secretary General, President of the General Assembly, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today to commemorate, to remember one of the most horrific crimes committed in the history of mankind, the Holocaust, the extermination of Jews on the basis of their ethnicity was the result of the Nazi ideology of racial superiority. And this ideology stems from inhuman colonial practices and then takes them to terrifying completion. We commemorate the victims of the Holocaust today on the 27th of January, on the day when the largest death camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Oświęcim in Polish, where at least 1 million Jews had been exterminated, was liberated by the Red Army, which played a key role in stopping the relentless machine of human annihilation. In this death camp, prisoners, including newborn children, were exterminated in gas chambers using the Zyklon B gas, the gas which had first been tested on Soviet prisoners of war. In the Auschwitz camp system, however, people were not only slaughtered, they were commercially exploited, and not just by the Nazis, who extracted gold teeth and cut the hair of their victims, but also by large German companies. For example, Auschwitz III camp was essentially a branch of the chemical conglomerate IG Farben. No aviation or artillery was used to liberate the camp. 231 Soviet rank-and-file soldiers and officers gave their lives for the freedom of the Auschwitz prisoners. The soldiers were accompanied by Soviet doctors who had experience in treating the emaciated by hunger people from the besieged Leningrad. And it is today, on the 27th of January, is the date when you remember the 81st anniversary of the lifting of the siege of Leningrad. More than 4,500 prisoners of Auschwitz, in the very first hours and days of their liberation, were given medical assistance, and this included Otto Frank, the father of the famous Anne Frank. A cavalier of 2 Orders of the Red Star and a medical service sergeant, Maria Karakosova, recalled that the eyes of the emaciated people with blackened skin shone with happiness because they saw that their liberation had come and they were finally free. A platoon commander, Lieutenant Vasily Gramatsky, recalled that the liberated prisoners cried and hugged us and told us that millions of people had been exterminated here. He wrote, "I still recall that they told us that 12 railroad cars filled with baby strollers alone were sent from Auschwitz, and they showed us the crematorium chimney and said that people were burned there." Eva Moses Kor, a Romanian Jew who survived experiments in the Auschwitz concentration camp, in her autobiographical book called Surviving the Angels of Death, described the liberation days as follows. On the morning of January 27th, for the first time in many weeks, it was completely silent. We hoped that this was the liberation we had hoped for, but we had no idea what it would mean for us. Then, at around 3 or 4 p.m., a woman ran out to the front of the barracks and started screaming, "We're free! We're free! We're free!" We are free? What did she mean? We wondered. We all ran to the doorway, and I stood at the top step, and huge snowflakes were falling on me. I could not see anything beyond a few feet in front of me. The snow had fallen all day, and the dirty gray of Auschwitz was now covered in a white blanket of snow. "Don't you see something's coming?" asked one of the older girls. And then I saw them. About 20 feet away from us, we saw Soviet soldiers emerging through the snow, approaching us in almost completely snow-covered uniforms. And they silently waded through the crispy snow towards us. As they came closer, they looked at us like they were smiling. Were those smirks or smiles? I tried to find out, then peered closely and saw that they were indeed smiling with real smiles. Joy and hope then welled up inside of us. We were finally safe and we were free. Crying and laughing, we ran up to the soldiers, hugging them. A shout rose from the crowd. We are free, we are free. There was laughter mixed in with tears, and this was a sound of celebration. The soldiers themselves could not hold back the tears and laughter and hold us back. They gave us cookies and chocolates, and these were the most delicious cookies and chocolates in the world, and that became for us the taste of freedom. End of quote. And I am certain that children who took the sweets then from the hands of Soviet soldiers could not imagine that a few decades later the decisive role of the Soviet army in the victory over Nazism and in putting an end to the Holocaust would start to be questioned, that the country where Auschwitz was located would demolish monuments to the soldiers and officers of the Red Army who liberated that country and the death camp, that representatives of the state that brought liberation from the Nazi death machine would not today be invited to the commemoration events in the former camp. Auschwitz prisoners could not have imagined either that Nazism and neo-Nazism would begin to rear its ugly head in many parts of the world, as was pointed out correctly so by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Nor could they see that the days of liberation from Nazi troops would be declared days of mourning, that monuments and streets would appear named after Waffen SS veterans, that neo-Nazi marches would be held, and that the veterans of the anti-Hitler coalition would be forbidden to wear their decoration and insignia. And this is why we annually submit to the General Assembly a resolution on combating the glorification of Nazism. The memory of all the victims of Nazism, including Jews, at least half of whom were citizens of the Soviet Union, is sacred for us. And this is why we are convinced that it is our common duty to preserve the truth about the Holocaust and other crimes of the Nazis and their accomplices, particularly the genocide of the peoples of the Soviet Union. This morning, we sent a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, which we requested be circulated as a document of the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council. In the attachment to this letter, one can find an extensive compilation of evidence of recent acts of glorification of Nazis and their accomplices. We must not forget that without the great victory of 1945, there would be neither the United Nations nor the world as we know it. It was the countries of the anti-Hitler coalition that took up the name of the United Nations, and no one has the right to consign the fact to oblivion. I thank you.